Namaste and hello. My name's Kai Anders, also known as Britt Anders. Britt and Kai are interchangeable. I don't hold much to names because I think of names as being the license tag that the DMV gives you. The name is just something that your parents hope you'd show up as, or they like the name and they want to be able to yell it out the window. Doesn't really have anything to do with you. So I believe that at a certain point, everybody should choose a vanity plate, or in other words, choose the name that they wish to be known by, so that it can help them in their pursuit of whatever goals that they wish. Kai is short for Kavaya Ananda, which is my spiritual name, so I use it mostly, and it is to help remind me of those things that I wish to cultivate. So, this one is your monster as your friend, or is your friend. Who was your monster in this life? Who is it that harmed you? Perhaps you have several monsters. I don't know. But whoever it is that haunts you, we're going to see if we can change the experience a little bit, especially if it's in the past. So, my father was my monster. He would tie me up to poles and beat me. He pistol whipped me once. We had this really interesting thing where after a beating he would sit on the couch and drink, and after a little bit he would leave me tied to the pole after beating me, and then after a little bit remorse would set in and he would untie me, and we would do two things, no particular order. We would either read the Bible and then watch porn flicks on the wall, or we would watch porn flicks and then read the Bible. Talk about issues. Took me a while to get over that one. Anyway, so he was my monster, and after I ran away from home, I would use him as my do not do role model, reverse role model. I became a decent person because anytime I had a decision that I didn't use with my sentence, that came a little bit later, and it took a while to develop it into a habit. Look up tombstone test in one of my other videos. That's what I mean by the sentence. Anyway, so I would hold my father up and I'd say, okay, so what would Tom do? And I would do the opposite. Whatever it was I thought he would do, I would do the opposite. Shows that I really thought highly of him at the time. Anyway, so what if, since we can believe anything that we want to believe after we die, right? Because none of us actually know. We have to be there to know. Now, there's some people with near-death experiences, there's mystics and whatnot, but the truth of the matter is we know what's going to happen when it happens. So, what if, after we die, we open our eyes in this next existence, and the first person that we see is this life's monster? Only, instead of recognizing them as the monster of this life, we recognize them as our absolute closest friend from before we were born. Because consider, if there is life after death, why isn't there life before death, right? Or before birth? Life doesn't end, it just moves, right? Life is basically movement. Even when it's present, just being still, there's still an experience of some sort of still movement, but it doesn't remain constant, except for on the very fundamental level. So we see our monster, and we recognize who they are from our previous existence before we were born, and we remember how hard it was to convince this loving, gentle creature, this beautiful friend of ours, to play the role of monster. Because if you're an eternal being, if you never die, and if you don't typically walk around with these bodies that are made up of food and cells and bacteria and things like that, if our souls are not that, then how can we experience pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling? That is a nervous reaction to being embodied. So, if we've played this game of life a few times before, like reincarnation suggests, then we've tried all the wonderful things, all the great feelings and experiences. So maybe it's time that we try something a little bit rougher. Why not? We know it's not going to hurt us. It may be unpleasant to the physical body, but the soul is just there observing. You can check that for yourself. Just go inside and look. What is it that's aware of your thoughts? Different seat. So anyway, we see this person, our monster, as our best friend, and we remember how hard it was to talk them into playing the part. And so we run up to him, we throw our arms around him, or whatever our equivalent is, and we say, "Thank you so much. I knew you would play the part so well. I appreciate what you've done. I recognize your sacrifice, and I really, really appreciate such a good job that you did." What does that do to the events that happen to you, the traumatic experiences? I have considered this at length with my father. It's easy for me now to see him as the perfect fundamental nature that he is, and to recognize that he was in a great deal of pain. He had a great deal of ignorance. And he had no way, he wasn't skillful enough to know that there was another way to achieve his goals of happiness and joy. So by hurting me, it made him feel a little bit less pressure of the pain and discontent, disconnect, and ignorance that he felt. He didn't know. And even if he knew up here, he didn't get it here. It hadn't sunk in. He hadn't made the realization yet. He didn't realize it for himself. So the events of my childhood, when looked at from the viewpoint of a mature adult, I can recognize that he was just in pain. He was an ignorant young man in a situation well over his head. I know what that feels like. I've been there more than once. Bet you have too. Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have done it. But in my next thought seat, I'll show you how I work with that, and how it is that even though I wouldn't recommend any of the stuff like that happened to me, I wouldn't recommend it to happen to anybody else. But for me, I wouldn't change a thing. I've realized the gifts contained within that experience. Anyway, I hope your experience is as gentle as you wish, as happy as can be, and may you recognize your own divine nature. Blessings.